One of the biggest myths is sleep training.
And to train them into behavior that developmentally is not at the right time for them, there's going to be detrimental
On
effects.
keeping mom up inside the womb, they're not just going to come out and fall asleep that night.
But it's understanding that, right? And so slowly like changing the bedtimes or those routines, different things that we can minimize the stimulation, right? We all need that sleep.
Serious one. Are you medicating the child to fit your timetable as a parent? You're trying to give them a sleep aid to actually help them fall asleep. Either way, not a good thing.
Involved in, because sleep is important, right? It
Incredibly
involves everything that we do. It could be the thing that's standing in the way of your success.
Welcome back to the Prime Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Skip Wyss, and I am with the amazing, fabulous, my wonderful co-host, Dr. Julie Wyss, the master of disaster, Dr. Fairy Fingers herself, BDC certified coach. Hi, Dr. Julie. How are you today?
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm doing pretty darn good, too. You look great today. You're looking very springy, very pink. I love it. I love you in pink. I think you look gorgeous. Pink and green. You always look really beautiful. I know fire engine red is your favorite color, but Dr. Julie, today we are talking all things Mythbuster style with sleep, starting off this episode with children.
Infants, kids.
Infants and kids, Mythbuster style. And why do we want to do this? That's the big question. Why would we want to talk about this?
I think it's important. I mean, we've had over 16 years, families and parents just come in exhausted or maybe they're on their second or their fourth child and it's completely different from their first one. Every child is completely different. And so I don't think that you can set an expectation of, well, this child did this, so this one must need to sleep this way, or you're doing something wrong, or there's something wrong with the child. Many times our child is telling us what they need, and sometimes we are just too busy or trying to run somebody else's program or expectation on that child.
Yeah, I think that comparison syndrome comes into this a lot, where parents compare children to children, but they also compare families to families. And they're like, well, my cousin Lisa, like her kid doesn't sleep through the night, or her kid sleeps through the night and mine doesn't, or they slept through the night at 6 weeks and the other one slept through the night at a year. And that's kind of our life. Like Peyton, our daughter, who's now 16, soon to be 16, she slept through the night at 6 weeks. 6 weeks she was sleeping through the night. So I remember that morning. I remember it like it literally was this morning. I shot out of bed. Peyton hadn't gotten up during the night to eat, which was crazy.
I remember too.
Yeah, because your chest was like rocks. I ran into her room and I was like, is she alive? I looked at her. She was still sleeping. This was about 6 a.m. And I was looking and watching, and I was watching for her to breathe. I felt her. She was warm, and she was still kicking and moving, but she was asleep. And I was panicked because she had gotten up 3 times a night up until that point to eat. And she slept through the night at 6 weeks. Now, Brecken didn't sleep fully through the night, our son, till how many months?
2.5 years.
Well, 2.5, yeah, but 14 months was when he actually slept through the night. But almost 2.5 years when he stopped actually getting up at least once a night. And some parents would look at that and they would be very wondering, like, what's wrong with our son? What's wrong with him? Why can't he sleep through the night? Why is he always up? And that was his normal body rhythm. He got up to eat through the first 14 months. And in those last few months, I was up with him at night to feed him once and then put him back down, gave him a bottle and put him back down. And then trying to learn how to understand his body and how his body is going through those sleep cycles. And I think that's very something we want to talk about right away. Is one of the biggest myths is sleep training. I think that sleep training is one of those things that parents seem to think they know how to do it, but they really don't.
And I think it's the stressor of Like, I understand, like, many of us work. Even if you're a stay-at-home parent, right? We all need that sleep. But I think if we can just understand that this is just a time period of where a child has needs, the baby has needs, that they're going to be up, and to train them into behavior that developmentally is not at the right time for them, there's going to be detrimental effects.
Yeah, and I think that parents put a lot of pressure on themselves and on their children to sleep train them. We have, I would say, half of our parents that come in with newborns will talk to us about sleep training. And they'll be like, yeah, I want to train them how to sleep. And I'm sorry, but here's the thing. Your child, you can, like, I don't care what book is wrote. I don't care all the studies that are out there that tell you can start sleep training an infant, a newborn. You can't. The newborn sleep trains you. You cannot sleep train them. They cognitively, they just don't do it that way. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Brain development wise, it doesn't work that way. They are so, infants and babies, newborns especially, are so in tune with their internal clock and their circadian rhythms. You cannot change that. Peyton, when she was born in the middle of the morning, early morning, middle of the night. She was born at 2:32 a.m. on the dot. She had her nights and days completely backwards for that good month and a half.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. She was up. And no, we didn't sleep train her. That's how she was. Ladies out there, if your child is super active at night when you go to bed, and most babies are, they are super active when mom goes to sleep. They're usually rolling around, keeping mom up inside the womb. They're not just going to come out and fall asleep that night.
But it's understanding that, right? And so slowly, like, changing the bedtimes or those routines, different things that we can minimize the stimulation to allow that child to, over time, each night, to change that bedtime routine earlier and earlier and earlier, to get it to reset to normal productive hours. But yeah, you can't sleep train. It's the stressor for the child. It's more stressor for you. It's just going to end up with more issues later on.
Well, here's the thing that I would try to have moms consider, especially moms that are when they're pregnant, is when does your child seem more active in the evening, and when are they more calm in utero in the evening? There's a good chance that they are very calm right around 6 to 7 o'clock inside mom. That is usually the sleep schedule that they're looking for when they're out this side, earth side, outside of you. And then they get really active again at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, because that's a feeding schedule for them. So consider really being in tune when you're pregnant as to when your baby's super active and when it's not.
Babies are selfish, right?
They are very selfish.
We need to follow their program.
They are little narcissists.
we can't be thinking about ourselves as a parent at that time of, well, it's not bedtime. I want to put my child to bed at 8 o'clock, so then they'll sleep through the night. That's where we're missing that window. And so it's keying into letting us understand of, okay, if the child is more calm at 6 o'clock, that's when we need to be doing that bedtime routine, getting them in bed.
Well,
so they're resting.
Case in point, our daughter, Peyton, she napped 2.5 to 3 hours a day at a stent. Brecken never napped for more than 90 minutes. We maybe had gotten a 2 hour out of him, but he was always 90. He was like 60 minutes to 90 minutes. That was his naps. But also, Brecken, when we got him to go to bed, the best time was 7:30, 7 o'clock. Like, we started his bedtime routine right after we finished dinner ourselves. Sometimes he was in bed before we had dinner. Peyton was different. Peyton went to bed right around 8:30, and she's still that way now. Even at 16, like, she'll try to stay up 9:30 because she thinks she can. And if she goes to bed at 8:30, she's out. She's out like a light. And these bedtime routines that we try to set up, they actually set up for us. Now, another thing that we hear is you shouldn't be co-sleeping. And we can set aside the safety of the child, but I want to talk about co-sleeping from a sleep perspective first. I have heard, and there's been a number of people on Instagram and Reels talking about how, number one, You should never co-sleep with your children because it causes weak children, which I found really weird. Because apparently it causes a codependency for sleeping. And then number two is that it causes bad marriages. And I found that hilarious because every family that I've met, especially at Prime Family Chiropractic Centers,
80%.
they all co-sleep and they all have multiple children and they all have very strong marriages and strong families. So I'm wondering where all of this myth came from that you shouldn't co-sleep.
I think it's the co-sleep of maybe somebody tried it, and then again the comparison factor came in that
Mm-hmm.
somebody else did it and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work, and so that, well, co-sleeping, it doesn't work. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't do it, or it's dangerous, or it's going to do this, or it's going to do that. Meanwhile, because maybe they chose not to co-sleep, that's where sleep was disruptive and then put a stress on the marriage.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. And then they're like, well, I can't have a strong marriage with my wife if I co-sleep. Are you talking a strong marriage as far as like communication and having good relationships, or are you just talking about the word on here all the time is sex and intimacy? Because that all those parents that I've talked to that have multiple kids in co-sleep, they're
It
still
out.
figuring it out. There's more than one room to have intercourse in your house, apparently. But some people feel that their kids interfere in all that. Well, then if that's the case, you need to figure out as a parent a structured time, or how do we get our children to bed. A lot of the times when parents co-sleep, they put their babies down in their bed, but they're not going to bed with them.
Mhm.
And the kids are just falling asleep in the bed, and that's just fine. It creates a place of warmth, it creates a place of family, and it creates a safe place for
Security.
those children later on.
I just, like,
Security.
if ever, like, you feel sick, or as a teen or as an adult, right? You go on a trip and maybe you get the homesick feeling,
Mhm.
or you smell something and entices that flicker back to, oh, I remember that smell, when I was at home. That is what our babies need. And so by having the comfort of being in our bed and the smell of mom and dad, and
Mhm.
just knowing that that presence is around them, that is what allows them to be able to sleep.
It is. Yeah, it's hearing your heartbeat, it's hearing dad's heartbeat, it's hearing you breathe. They are used to that. That's the rhythm. In fact, they make bears
Mhm.
that you can turn on that have
To
a
mimic a
heartbeat
heartbeat.
to them, that have a breathing respiration to them, that you put in the bed with your baby, and it keeps them hearing your heartbeat, which then circadian rhythm, inborn internal clock, calms that child down and makes them fall asleep. So co-sleeping, I am a huge, huge advocate of co-sleeping. I love co-sleeping. We did now, to be fully transparent, we did not co-sleep with our children. They were in our room. They were in a bassinet. They were in our bed for a while, in and out, but we transitioned them into their bedroom when they were ready. We didn't just force them off either. Like, we transitioned them into it when they were ready.
It was different for each.
It was different for each, and that's a big thing, is it cannot be a set standard. And all these people, when you read books and you try to set yourself to a standard, you're setting yourself up to let yourself down, and then you're going to feel like a failure as a parent, when really you just need to watch your child as they grow up, watch their rhythms when they want to fall asleep, and look for those things like rubbing of the eyes, lots of yawning. Do they just seem tired? Because we know that if a child gets overtired, things go crazy. We get into that second step, and all that extra energy comes. And we have all been there. We've pulled all-nighters in college. Like, we all of a sudden, there's a point where you can't fall asleep because your adrenaline's going crazy, but your body's exhausted. And then as soon as you take your test, you're like ready for a nap. Like, that's your body just running off of adrenaline. Kids do the exact same thing.
And then it's not restful sleep either.
Right. And that's segueing into this next one, is medicating children to get them to fall asleep. And the question is that, are you, and this is a serious one, are you medicating the child to fit your timetable as a parent, or are you medicating or trying to give them a sleep aid to actually help them fall asleep? Either way, not a good thing. Telling you right now, not a good thing. You need to hold space for your child when they fall asleep, but more importantly, how do you get them to sleep? What are the things that you're doing or that they're doing that are keeping them from falling asleep? What are the habits? What are the things that are really getting in the way of their body calming itself down, using its natural state of sedatives, which is melatonin, which is a hormone, by the way. It's a hormone. It's not something that you can just take as a vitamin. It's not a vitamin. It is a hormone. And that hormone is extremely important when it's released during stage 3 non-REM sleep. And we'll get into that with our adult version of this in a little bit and the science behind it. But we medicate our children way too early to get them to fall asleep.
I would say many of these first ones were more infant newborns.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think that this isn't for newborns.
Okay.
And infants, although we've
I've run into it.
Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Typically this is a little bit older child. That's how I like to place it in my head, because
over
otherwise
3.
it's way too young. But even
we see it commonly in 3 years old and up. That's that's seriously when we see it. 3 years old and up, the kid's been given either a CBD gummy or they've been given melatonin, or they've been, and I sympathize and I empathize with our parents out there that deal with this. There's so much information, but the deal with a child that's not sleeping properly through the night. The thing is with that is, number one is what's proper. So a child should average between 8 to 10 hours of sleep at a minimum. Most sleep specialists will recommend a child gets at least 12 hours of sleep at a minimum until they're 14. 12 hours. So like 8 to 6. 8 to 8.
But you have to think, these are pivotal developmental periods. The brain needs that time to be able to process and all of the neurology that happens, right? But that's to grow and to recover and to heal. It's not that's where, when our kids are in too many different things and they're overstimulated, it's hard to shut them down. Yeah,
and it's the recovery is key. Think about this out there, folks, moms and dads listening, and particularly dads. When are your kids most active? When are you most active in your life? When you're a child. That's when you're most adults.
I wish I had all that energy.
Well, we hear that all the time. All the time. I wish I had the energy of my child. Well, you could. You just need to get up and
12
move.
12 hours of sleep.
You need to get sleep. And the other side of it is that the reason why they need sleep is so they can recover. And you need good recovery. And that's the thing, is when you are placing your children on sleep sedatives, whether it is melatonin, which shuts down the natural ability of your body's ability to actually produce melatonin, which is not okay, which messes with their hormones, giving them a CBD gummy to calm them down, which is CBD, again, is another substance that's out there that I understand the medicinal value of it, the herbal value of it, as short-term solutions to help fight somebody that's in pain, or give them a sedative to calm them, these kinds of things. But it's no way to live your life every day. You don't have lack of stress in your life because you're on CBD. You have stress in your life because you can't cope and you can't recover. That's why stress gets crazy. So the reason why some people out there don't seem to be stressed, it's not because they're sitting around with tons of CBD in their body. It's because they're not living in a hyper-stressed environment. People slept really well for decades without CBD oil. They slept really well for decades without THC. These are the things that, because we live in a society now that is extremely fast-paced, extremely high-stressed, tons of background radiation from our cell phones, from the things that we keep in our bedrooms, having Wi-Fi in our house, these are all things that will keep your children awake at night because they're extremely sensitive, but it also will do the same thing to you as an adult,
So I think it's understanding all of these other environmental factors. And so if you're not going to leave the stress of, for a child, if they can't leave the stress of school, if they can't, leave the stress of the environment that they're in, then we need to understand, okay, what are the things that we can support them?
Yep. How do we support? So what are some things that you would do with a child when they, infant? So we're talking babies here. So what are some things that you see as a mom that you can help support that baby in falling asleep?
Having that bedtime routine, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about, oh, that was so relaxing, if it was a massage or, that vacation, because it was the sounds or the atmosphere, what it smelled like, really of every night setting up that sanctuary. I mean, if people would plan their sleep like they do a trip, right? If they would be that involved in, because sleep is important, right? It involves everything that we do. It could be the thing that's standing in the way of your success.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get as much attention and detail into our sleep routine and really thinking it through, that, okay, I'm going to, I'm dedicated to getting my 8 hours of sleep. I'm dedicated to my 10 hours. Maybe some people need 6 hours, but let's make that impactful, the 6 to 10 hours of sleep. These are the things that I'm going to do for myself. These are the things that I need to do for my child to make sure that they are getting the sleep and recuperative sleep that they need.
Okay, so you're talking about bedtime routine. What are some good ways to get an infant to calm down for bed then?
So for an infant, say if their usual kind of rousing sleepy time is after your dinner. So after dinner, then maybe you are doing a little baby massage,
Okay.
but that could be your bath time
Mm-hmm.
or that quiet, washing baby up time. Then do some baby massage. Maybe then you're reading a bedtime story.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the nursery with you, or if they're in the room, maybe you have some sounds that are playing, but it's that connection. It's lowered voices. The lighting is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's just getting into that routine. If it's putting on the pajamas, it's the same routine every night, so the baby knows that, okay, I've done all
It's
of
the
these
wind down and
things.
wind up.
Yep, that
What
it's
is
time
your
for bed.
thought then about breastfeeding your child to sleep? Because I have had numerous moms come in that have been told to not feed your child to sleep, to not breastfeed them and have them fall asleep during breastfeeding. I sit in a little bit different camp than that. What's your thought on that?
So I mean, if that's the end culmination of the night, right? I don't see a problem with then feeding baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is they're filling up, that's their nutrition, that is that bonding, that is that
Mm-hmm.
security that baby is getting.
Mm-hmm.
If they rouse awake a little bit as you're then laying them down, that's great. But then it's more of that comfort of, all right, we're full, we're tucked in. That is the beginning for sleep. That's the end of the bedtime routine.
I agree with you. I think that that is something that if that's part of the routine, if that is breastfeeding your child to sleep, it's super important. But the other side of it is that we need to hold space for is that after every meal as an adult, you're not ready to take a nap or go to bed. And it's the same thing in your children as well, especially in infants and babies like newborns, is a lot of parents will put a lot of stress on themselves and their newborns if the newborn doesn't fall asleep after a breastfeeding meal. If it's during the day, generally at night they will fall asleep right after. A lot of the times they do fall asleep after they breastfeed. Like that's normal to see. Same thing with bottle fed babies that get breast milk. Formula fed babies, it's a little bit different. Sometimes they stay awake. But when they do stay awake after breastfeeding, that's not necessarily a bad thing either.
But it's understanding that in your routine,
Yes.
right? So if that's that child that it doesn't matter if they eat that gets them more,
Mm-hmm.
excited or more awake, then start with the feeding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then do the feeding, then do the bath time or the wash up,
Yeah.
then put the pajamas on, do some naked time, do some baby massage,
Skin to
sing,
skin.
read a story, that skin to skin,
Mm-hmm.
because we need to just get, like, if baby can sense your stress, your anxiety, your heart beating
Mm-hmm.
like crazy, they're going to get geared up.
Mm-hmm.
So we ourselves need to be able to be calmed down. And so this is just as much for the parent,
Mm-hmm.
this routine, as it is for the child.
And I will tell you that most of our moms out there that do this love it. Like it's such a calming time. And mamas, your first 6 months of life with your baby this side of you, it is an extremely important bonding experience. It's a very, very important time to hold space, to help those babies go to sleep, to take time out and not be rushed by it. And honestly, if you're rushed by it, we need to take a step back and try to really figure out, why are you feeling rushed by it? Why are you feeling like this has to speed up? Why does this have to happen in this realm? Why does it have to happen at this time? And if that's the case, where you're putting so much pressure on yourselves for your child to fall asleep, sit down and really think about, okay, where are there times in my day that I can maybe make up this time, so when I do lay down with my baby, when I do help them fall asleep, I don't feel like I'm missing out on 10 different things that I feel like I had to get done that day.
And the baby can feel that.
Yeah,
Right?
they
The baby
can.
knows. It's the same thing like if you're like talking with your spouse and
Mhm.
like, yeah, the person's there, but they're totally tuning you out. Your babies know that even though you could be holding them, like you're off just doing something else. And
Mhm.
so make the most of that time, be intentional, be present, because it's just as much like for moms, it's just as much for you as it is for that child. We can talk postpartum, but having that time just to be able to be solely focused, that is the one thing. That's all that they need. That's the one job.
Is focused on them and
Mhm.
focused on both of you. And then when your spouse comes into this, they can help with that too.
Mhm.
But a lot of the times, your baby does not want the significant other, spouse, husband, to be there and put them to bed. Most of the time, they want their mom with them. That's that nurturing environment. Naps, it's a completely different thing. Dads are usually really good at getting babies down for naps. These are all things that we can do for our children, especially for our newborns from 0 to 6 months this side to 0 to a year, is understanding those time frames. Every child is different, but just having that really good routine, not putting things into their body that doesn't need to be there, and just allowing for things to come and calm, and being very intuitive about how that internal clock is running.
Yeah, and I would say like if you're co-sleeping and you have that TV in the bedroom and
Yeah.
you're
Oh
struggling
yeah.
and wondering why that baby's not sleeping,
Hmm.
it's the same reason you're not sleeping. We could do a whole podcast on blue light, but
Oh, we will. Next podcast.
but just keep that in mind of the electronics are, I mean, they're detrimental to an adult, so just
Hmm.
think of that exponentially to your baby, giving them your phone to be able to settle down,
As
to
they get
even
bigger, for
play with.
sure. Yeah.
Same thing with the TVs, those all will affect the sleep, the type of sleep,
Hmm.
and how agitated your baby is.
Yeah, and that old word coming back in, melatonin. Blue
Mhm.
light directly affects and negatively affects melatonin and its regulation in the body. So we are going to get into that next episode. This has been a really good one, busting some of these myths on infants and trying to get your babies to fall asleep. If you need anything, reach out to us. Also, coming up here, you can always jump on our wait list. Click that link below down in the comments to come and get on one of our sleep challenges. We walk through all of this stuff over 4 days, walk through sleeping with babies, sleeping with children, how we do it for adults, and basically setting ourselves up for great sleep so we can actually recover and be extremely healthy. But just click that link below if you want to come and get on one of those amazing challenges that we put on about every other month, every month, depending on time cycle, and just come be a part of it with us. So, Dr. Julie, you got anything else today? All
No.
right. Go out there, get some sleep with your kids now, and get it done. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.